Fidel Castro reshaped politics in Cuba. Under his rule, the country experienced devastating poverty, but they also saw advances in healthcare and education. Julia Zweig is the author of Cuba, What Everyone Needs to Know, and a senior research fellow at the University of Texas. Julia joins us now from Washington. Julia, what does Castro's death mean to Cuba at a time where U.S. has restored relations with the country?
Well, Rena, good morning. And I would say it means, as Portia was saying, there's going to be a period of wait and see as far as the relationship with the United States goes, on the one hand. On the other hand, we've had over the last 2 years between the Obama White House and Raul Castro in Havana an extremely busy and active agenda of knitting together lots of programs between the two governments on the environment, on security, on cooperation on various different public health, the movement of people back and forth. Those dynamics are going to continue up until the moment that Barack Obama steps down. We're just about less than a month away from the second anniversary of the December 17th, 2014 opening, when Raul and Obama announced that the two governments had been engaged for the previous year in secret talks. And in fact, the commercial relationship is advancing. We have commercial flights beginning the day after tomorrow. No, excuse me, early next week. We have cruise ships. We have a huge uptick, 80% this year over last, in Americans traveling there. We have universities, museums, small cities, big cities sending delegations, sending kids for school year abroad there, and vice versa, Cubans coming here to study. So I think we're going to see an interest at the official level in Cuba of seeing those dynamics continue, certainly continuing them, watching them advance as much as possible for the next 2 months. And then we'll have to see what it is that the new incoming administration chooses to do in terms of addressing all of those material and demographic and commercial changes, including between Cuban Americans and their home country, that have unfolded in the last few years.
Julia, how influential was Raul Castro in helping to change relations between the U.S. and Cuba?
Enormously so. This is, as much as it is President Obama's legacy, this opening with the United States is a huge part of Raul Castro's legacy. And he recognized in Obama a viable partner with whom he could work to try, in the last few years of his tenure, after all, he's stepping down in the beginning of 2018, he says, to try to leave the relationship in a better place, to take the adrenaline-ridden national security crisis aura that for the last 50 years characterized the two countries, to put that to bed and to recognize the reality that the United States is a natural market for Cuba, that Cuba has more than 10% of its population living here, that we are geographically and culturally and certainly historically close. This would not have happened without Raul Castro's leadership and the political will emanating from him down throughout his government.
I want to ask you if there's anyone that Raul Castro is grooming to take over in an event that something were to happen to him. I've heard the name Miguel Diaz-Canel. Can you tell us more about him? And is he looked at as a potential successor to Raul?
Well, he is looked at as the potential successor, and he was named when Raul Castro took office for this second term he is now serving back in 2013. Miguel Diaz-Canel, who has served as Minister of Higher Education and more or less governor of 2 central and eastern provinces in Cuba, was designated first vice president, so that means the immediate number 2 within the political hierarchy of Cuba, as the person who Cubans could look to succeed Raul Castro. And Diaz-Canel is in his late 50s. He's been traveling around the world, around the country. He is well liked, as I understand it. His training is as an engineer. And when he was working in the provinces, he was experimenting with decentralization, local taxation, efforts in terms of local governments to take decision-making away from Havana and implement much more local participation on the ground. And he did well in that capacity.
Julia, you've covered Cuba very closely, watched this country closely. What will you be looking for as now this death of Fidel Castro dovetails with the time here as we're getting a new president in January here in the United States?
Yes, Rena, that is an excellent question. And, look, I'm going to be looking very closely to see how the Trump incoming Trump team, who it designates as Secretary of State, the kind of language, the kind of touch points that we've seen so far with Trump, for example, cheering on the fact that he was endorsed by the now quite aging members of the brigade that invaded the Bay of Pigs in 1961. That kind of reference to a failed policy, a failed violent policy to overthrow the Castro regime, seems to me lots of backward thinking. I would hope that that would switch to taking a look at the opportunity that the Trump administration will have to solidify quite a potential for a new direction in Cuba, which has become a much more open society than it's been in the 30 years I've been traveling there. Okay. I'll also be looking to see how the Cubans react to the Trump tweets and the Trump appointments.
Okay, Julia Zweig, author of Cuba, What Everyone Needs to Know. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Rena.